And we're live. Hello and
We're
welcome to
live.
another episode of Game Theory Gang. I'm Maddie Allen with ChrispyMan of HEXfire.io and Fast Abdoul of 2phux.io. Welcome.
Yeah,
Thank
Merry
you, Matt.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas indeed.
Merry
Happy
Christmas.
holidays.
Hit that like button. That's what I want for Christmas is everybody to share this out and hit the like
All I
button.
want for Christmas, my two front teeth. Oh, wait, I got those already.
Some of my back teeth is what I need, actually. My
Yeah.
front teeth are fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how about that dip?
Yeah, that was quite the dip. It's gone now, though. So, long dip.
Crispy, not affected. No, not affected.
Crispy unaware.
Yeah. So for me, Maddie, my experience with that is I left about 4 or 5 hours before that happened to go to a wedding. And it was a 5-hour drive, right? So I wasn't connected.
Oof.
And then I was at a wedding, which was a very nice wedding. And it required all of my attention until around 2:30 in the morning. And then I went to sleep. And then I got up and drove home for another 4 hours. So my attention was not on crypto for that period of time. And it just so happens that that corresponds to the dip. But probably for me.
So you're saying you didn't cause it?
Well, I certainly didn't cause it and I didn't participate. But probably the best thing ever is I would have been tempted to do some stuff. And I was not tempted to do anything because I wasn't there. And so afterwards, I was able to come in and pick up a few assets that I was interested in picking up that, were on a fire sale, so to speak. So I made my shifts around and whatnot, but really helped me for what I was doing. And probably I know I've talked about this a little bit with people. I'm all about planning. So I've already have set up some liquidity pools that are stable liquidity pools. And I've been talking and doing research about, how do people plan to get out into stables over the next year. So I'm not saying run for the exits, but what wasn't affected by all this? My stable pools. They pretty much were unaffected, other than
Nice.
they bounced around in the range and earned a bunch of rewards. So
Cool.
The stables held up well on the chain, too. Like, we have the 3 liquidity forks, and they're all, within spitting distance of a dollar now. Of course, there was dips on all kinds of stuff for like that, mostly at 1 hour period of time, but they all bounced back. Code worked. So stables on Pulse Chain are strong.
Beautiful.
the force is strong in these ones.
Whoa, thanks for the $80 a super chat, Ida. Much appreciated. Very cool. Thanks for the super chat. Merry Christmas. Saying in the chat. Love it. Fast Abdoul, where were you? What were your whereabouts during this flash crash in Pulse Chain that occurred? What was it? A couple days ago now.
Yeah. I was sitting right here, Manny, with this wintry landscape. And I pretty quick, I was on the screen with St. Wolf telling people that the bridge still worked, and that because that was one of the concerns. One of the FUD items was like, oh, the bridge is going to be frozen. There'll be no way to get DAI off the chain or anything like that. And I was like, no, it's decentralized. This is how it works. And we went over the bridge and calmed down as many people as we could. And, so it was we're some of the first ones on the scene to be on the screen to talk about what's going on. And fortunately, it was very short-lived, very quickly. When the bridge did get a little bit clogged because so many people who were trying to bridge in funds to buy the dip, right? And when those funds got in, man, that dip disappeared pretty fast. So it was an exciting day. We'll say that.
Yeah. I was, I don't remember what I was doing. I think I was getting all my stuff set up here in Texas now that I've moved to Texas suddenly. But yeah, everything's been going good with that. And so I look at my phone and got an emergency text from Future Us saying, buy the dip, buy Hex. It's 20% off. So by the time I, got all my hardware wallets connected and that sort of stuff, it had already dipped another 20% and was already recovering
Yeah, it came
up
back a little bit.
20%. So
I think it's still down. Is it still down in pulse terms about 20%, 30%? I'll go look and see.
I think
I
so.
think
Yeah.
I think it is. It's still it's huge opportunity right now for Hex
Like to the
because
price of pulse? Is that what you're saying by pulse
yeah, the
terms?
pulse. That's the only thing that matters, dude. And I was so glad. I was so glad that Richard was talking about that today on his stream. That's pretty awesome that he did bring that up. He actually underscored two of my big learning themes that I've been pushing. One is have dry powder, quote unquote, your position, your stable position ready to go. So if you need to, you have the opportunity to do things, right? That's part of the reason to have this types of things set up. But the other, right, because it gives you flexibility, right? So maybe you're not planning to do anything. You get $10,000 in stables and you're doing an LP pool. Well, if there's a dip like this, you can pull the plug, right?
Yep.
And pull the plug and go do it, right? And go get whatever you want to buy with your stables, right? So it's having that liquidity. Now, normally the plan is to wait until the future, but there are opportunities that come along like this, right?
Yep.
And it happens early. But the other thing he was talking about is just this whole idea of how do you slow roll out with those stables over time. And then another part of it was the only thing that really matters is the ratio to pulse. Now he started talking in his video about the pulse chart itself, which one pulse is one pulse, right? You guys know that, right? Like one pulse equals one pulse. Right. So
Like 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin, right?
oh, you're so smart. So yes. So picking
And
up
and
on that,
and the idea there is that people are like pricing things. They're basically changing their unit of account to be able to think in the denomination of whatever the currency is that we're talking
100%.
about. So Bitcoiners they think in a Bitcoin terms, so they're not always looking at the ratio of USD because USD isn't the denominator of the ratio that they're looking at. Supposedly.
Well, it's misleading too because what it can do is it can knock you out of position. All right. So if you did nothing, you have a new ratio to pulse, right? You forget about the USD price. If you did nothing, you have a new ratio to pulse for all your positions. But if you did something, you may now be in a worse shape than you were before. You might not have came back, and the dollar prices kind of throw that off. Like, so for instance, somebody was asking this morning, about the dip and what happened and what my thoughts were and all that. And so, but my answer, I went looked to the charts. Well, okay, pulse went down, pulse went up. Pulse X was at -3% this morning. Inc was at -3% in pulse terms. Is that a big deal for us? Not a big deal for us, man. We see that 6 times a day, right? It changes that time that much. So, it's kind of overwrought. So big question is, why did all this happen? I don't know what happened. Was it real? I don't know. The timing is super curious. How it came about and who promoted making that happen and get it. Well, I don't know. Maybe, but regardless, never let a good black swan opportunity go to waste, buddy. Right? No, not going to let a good FUD opportunity go to waste. So somebody was ready and they pushed the button. And then, of course, we know that whoever starts the cascade, but whoever starts it right is big enough. The rest of the people watching the other whales see it happen and they push the button because you know what? They are steely-eyed sharks and they want the most out. And you know what? The guy who sells last gets a little bit screwed, right? So unless they're going to round trip it, right? So they that started the cascade across multiple assets, right? And pretty much, you guys do your own self-analysis. Go look at your bags. You made moves. Go figure out if you have as many units. That's probably what just happened. You end up with less units. People buying back right after they sell.
So the headline for anybody that was I don't know, like asleep or something, like Hawk Tua for the past like 2 weeks. Basically
Hawk
there's
Tui on that fox, right? So we were.
there's this FUD that had come out like in January or like even before then. Some like news article that was unsubstantiated or lacked details and like didn't get much of a reaction at the time that alleged that Richard Hart didn't pay his taxes, although you can see in public records that he did pay his taxes. So it's a question of like how much he paid, I guess. And then there's also the allegation that he had punched a 16-year-old, and somehow this landed him on the getting a red notice that you see in the movies for like Interpol, basically saying that there's an arrest out for him internationally. And there were lots like false reports, and there were a lot of people in the pulse chain community who did their own research and concluded that Interpol is like a corrupt agency, kind of like the SEC. We know the SEC is a corrupt agency, and so there's been lots of like mudslinging and that sort of stuff. And then of course all the Bitcoiners, they piled on, and some of them reported falsely like what had happened. And even we saw on like just today I saw that the people on Twitter were trying to community note all of Richard's tweets. And I'm one of the raiders for that, so I went in there and we successfully removed like people who were telling the truth, like removed some of the lies. People were basically, for community notes, it has to go through like a review process before it shows the general public that there's a community note on this. And so basically I was I was like looking at this community note that was saying that Richard has, he's already been found guilty of all these crimes and stuff. And obviously that's not true. So luckily the Twitter truth engine kicked in and did its job successfully. But yeah, so basically that was like the headline was, red notice or whatever towards Richard Hart. And of course, Hex doesn't have a founder. So like that was also like falsely reported by Max Kaiser's wife. Like, oh, this is what happens when you have a CEO, which like couldn't be farther from the truth. And then, so there were all these reactions. But the thing that I found so interesting was that people who I follow who do technical analysis, they were scratching their heads saying like, oh, it's like Hex is so overdue for like a 40 or 50% dip, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and it was like, becoming a crisis to some. And like, then I saw Hans had like publicly broadcast like, there should be a dip here. And so I'm not sure how much of it was just like the recycled FUD and how much of it was just kind of an overdue correction. But it certainly got more notoriety, and I think it got more money bridged into the chain, or at least the bridge got clogged with money coming in.
Yeah, people deployed. But it was totally old news, so it was kind of strange, like almost artificial, like
right.
That it happened when we all knew that the Finnish government wanted him to pay tax. It wasn't new.
But was the red notice, was that part new?
That was new, yes.
Okay. And then there's like this whole debate about like whether the alleged like assault situation, which like first of all, I don't think you should get a red notice. Like you shouldn't be listed with like killers and stuff if you just punch somebody allegedly. But then there was all this to do about like whether it was a boy or a girl who like had alleged getting punched, and then people did an analysis and showed Richard's hands. It had no marks on them when he did a live stream 5 days after the like reported date this supposed situation. So pretty much people are saying that it doesn't seem possible that somebody could, punch somebody in the face so much that they have a bloody shirt and not have a mark on their hands. I know like Johnny Cass reported today that he burned the shit out of his hand just cooking. And like normally he beats his hands up just like walking around his office. So,
oh yeah, punching somebody wrecks your hands. That's for sure.
Yeah. So that seems a little suspicious and dubious.
Seem very sensationalized, like the person had blood on their clothes, and they don't say if it's a boy or a girl, implying to me that it was probably a boy, because if it was a girl, they could have sensationalized that more. So my theory is some kid tried to steal his watch and he beat him down, or it never really happened. Also possible.
And this was supposedly in 2021, and but I did hear that Nuclear Herbs has contacted the local police department to try to get a copy of the report to find out more about this situation, because it certainly, if not like even disregarding the price, this is like an issue of PR. It's an issue of credibility and all that good kind of stuff. And for what it's worth, Richard Hart kept alluding to the fact that he's never been safer and he's never been more optimistic about the future. And he kind of saw all this fake news coming. So
he's a rock star now, like most wanted crypto founder in history. It's kind of tough, actually. Like, serious, like an Interpol red notice is that's like comic book level, right?
Right.
It's pretty hilarious.
Right.
Except for everybody else on there is some sort of crazy terrorist who's like murdered multiple people, and then Richard Hart, right? Which makes it seem all the more like fake, right? It's like, like his picture beside these guys who are wanted for blowing stuff up and various murders, and then one guy from Finland who didn't pay his taxes and maybe punched a teenager who tried to steal his watch. Like there's it just doesn't fit at all. It's really weird.
Here's an interesting comment by Finbear. He says the reason that the article translates to person is because in Finland we have no he or she. We're all quote unquote that guy.
Wow.
Interesting.
Finland is woke.
Yeah. I think Richard Hart is a rock star, and I don't know if you guys remember, like when Hex launched, there was a bunch of fake news that came out against him, like saying that he had multiple passports because he murdered somebody. None of that was true. In fact, it turned out, once he addressed it, I'm not sure, within a year or something, it was a tragic situation where I think it was down in Panama where the mafia had killed his lawyer. Basically killed his friend over them robbing him. And so he was not to blame and didn't have anything to do with it. But then the Bitcoiners who were so pissed off of having a vampire attack against them, and Richard originally being a Bitcoin promoter and then launching his own coin. I mean, I don't think anybody in Hex ever went after Jack Levin and made up lies that he murdered people and fabricated evidence and stuff. Seems like we've evolved a little bit compared to the kind of the Bitcoiners that would stoop so low to cheer on a corrupt government or to just flat out lie to such a grave extent.
Yeah, pretty strange. But he said he's never been safer, so I'm not going to speculate on where he is, but I'm guessing it's probably not in Finland, and he's not worried about getting arrested right now. So that's great. He sounded very confident and comfortable and articulate on his message today, which was a great surprise for everybody.
Right? Yeah, he released a 1-hour recording today, and that's what everybody seemed to comment on. more than anything was his tone of voice being so confident and
Totally.
positive.
And it wasn't like just a fluff piece. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, everybody, Merry Christmas from Richard Hart. And certainly he said Merry Christmas and, Richard Hart loves you and that kind of stuff. But like he went into depth on things, talking about the pulse chain and the quality of it and what it brings to the table and decentralization, to a degree that he is not for quite a while on, certainly not on YouTube or any sort of live voice. So it makes me wonder, are we going to see more of that? Even if it's pre-recorded, like if we could have one of those once a week, I would think that was a win.
Oh yeah. Well, I caught at the very end, he said, "I'll talk to you guys soon." So I clipped that and posted it on Twitter because I'm not sure if it's just an expression or if he really will be speaking to us again soon. But
it doesn't say much that he doesn't mean.
The most notable thing.
Yeah, that's very notable. And like it kind of had a feel to it of like gloves are off, right? Like it's he wasn't holding back. He wasn't just saying happy, nice things anymore. It's like no, there was a little bit of attack there. He didn't mention everything that was going on by name, but it definitely felt more aggressive than previous comments on Twitter or live streams. I feel like he's stepping into the ring.
Oh yeah. Well, and I don't know if this has been previously reported or if I'm the first one to discover it, but his DMs are open on Twitter now.
Oh man, I better get on that.
So yeah, I certainly sent an invitation for the upcoming Hex conference. That's for sure. Of course, that's the same day every year that I always try to get him to speak, and that's the last time he spoke live. So we got the suspense building for January 9th here, the last day of the 4-day conference.
So give me the top 3 negatives though, man. So just envision, let's play the opposites game, right? Like I'm super positive on it, but what are the negatives that came out of that to people who might have been watching that?
I mean, I think. Are you saying about like the red notice?
No. I mean, with Richard's video, right? Like, would we all conclude right at the moment that we all felt it was pretty bullish, the 3 of us?
Oh yeah.
I felt pretty bullish about it.
So how is it that we could feel bullish, and other people watched that and they came back with liar, scammer, bullshit artist? How could people have watched that and come back with that? Because I think that's an interesting. I think it's a way of understanding what we're against, right? Like
some sort of childhood trauma, head injury, that kind of thing.
Yeah, TBI, sure. Well, I think probably a couple of different categories of people for me. So I think of it like this: like if I was listening to that and I've got a negative reaction, it's because I've been screwed before pretty hard. Right. And that means I got pegged, not the P-dot kind of pegged. I mean, I got pegged. And so when that's happened, right, I'd come at something like that, be like, I ain't believing what anybody, bullshit. Right. I don't believe what anybody has to say. Let them show me. Right. Of course, I did approach Hex that way and I was shown. Right. So I have that backdrop of having already done that. So I think there's that. I think there's people who are new, people that don't have the experience with our chain, with Richard Hart, and then I think there's in a grand scale the trader class, and the gold miners, right? That are out here they're just here to get the money, right? They heard because people keep repeating it that somebody's going to pay and pump all this stuff up and you're going to be able to pull millions out and pull it out, right? And so for all those people, man, they're looking at this, they're like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? This is the biggest, worst lie. I mean, I don't feel this way, but I mean, this is what I envisioned. This is the biggest, worst lie I've ever heard. It's such crap. I couldn't get over in the first place. I couldn't get out. I lost all this money because I sold. You know, the trading, my trades just went bad. I thought I was getting in at the bottom at Teddy Bear, you know, and in 3 hours it went down 40%. You told me that PDI is gonna, gonna peg to $1. Now it's down at a penny, whatever the numbers came out to be, right? So, anyways, I had kind of envisioned that's all this kind of like FUD kind of thinking that people listen about. I don't know if you
I think
guys have
people just like
comments.
to jump on board, right? Like that's human nature quite often is when you have a group of people, like that's the cell mobs happen, right? Be like, everybody's angry at this guy. Okay, I want to be on the winning team. I'm going to be angry at this guy too. It's the easiest choice to join the bullies rather than, stand up for what's right. So you're gonna see that from mainstream influencers, from, just the plebs on other chains. That's the easy thing to do. But certain like the people who will stand up to bullies, you see a distinctly different message from them, and I think it becomes pretty obvious who's who.
Yeah. Well, I my digging into this thinking is Richard, I've done a couple streams on this. We've talked about it here a bunch of times, but there's like these core beliefs, right? That he summarized. I stole some of them from him, probably, right? But this idea that you got to believe in crypto, you got to believe in blockchain, in the first place, you got to believe that Bitcoin was okay or good, and then you got to believe that Ethereum was better, and then you got to believe that Pulse Chain's better than Ethereum, and then you got to believe that Hex is the king, right? This kind of like the thought process that we who went through, a couple of years of this come out the other end. And along with that, even if we feel guilty because we're off doing trading and we know that's not the plan, we know what the plan is. The plan is set your positions and hold. That's the plan, right? Look for dips, buy, increase your numbers of units. There isn't trading. Trading isn't, it's not part of the way, the Richard Hart way. I think that's a fair statement. Would you guys agree with that? That trading, other than for the purpose of protection or increasing your units, is not part of the RH planning?
Well, he very distinctly says that. I think that traders get wrecked. I think is the quote, which
Traders get wrecked. Yeah.
By and large is I believe is true. Traders don't do as well as holders most of the time. There's always the top 1% of the 1%. But for just the regular people, that is maybe not the play.
Yeah. Well, the greatest hidden secret is, and it's right out in open, it's not even hidden, right? Is that his advice to become most successful is acquire units at a cheap price.
Totally.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So
that's his approach.
I could I could push back a little bit that
push it.
That
push my stool.
Trading's part of the game. It's not the optimal strategy for people who are like the most long-term thinking, for the people who are the most enthusiastic about Hex. But I think the whole reason of Pulse Chain and Pulse X was to expand, to basically have a bigger stack, a bigger tech stack of things than, basically, what do they call that? Vertical integration or something?
Yeah, it's vertical integration for sure. Well, I think you're right about that part, but I know that he is now a father of many children in the blockchain space, but I think it comes right back to, when we had the message come out to us that, hey, the best way to have greater value is by hodling, right? And therefore staking and earning rewards on the hodl makes even more sense, right? It's about delayed gratification and who can hold the longest, right? Or she, or whoever, right? Can hold the longest, gets the greatest price. kind of engenders this idea. But that we never forget that's encased with people that lose value, right? So, because I know, Merry Christmas, right? So I won't get into it, but people have to trade for value to be transferred, and that's what happens, right?
True.
Yeah. Interesting. So what did Richard just say? Did he say he's watching this stream and he's like, these guys are awesome?
Well, I've got some basically some juicy takes on this already because I actually know what Richard's tweet is referring to.
Tell us.
Here we go. I'll share it.
Do
Yeah. So I mean, Eric Wall posted a few hours ago basically some FUD that Pulse Chain is the most centralized POS chain in the world because the OA owns 90% of the supply, and so like that's something he couldn't wrap his head around or couldn't like square in his own mind. I wonder if that has anything to do with what Richard tweeted, where 3 minutes ago he said, smart people think they understand the blockchain, but they don't. Blockchains are socially enforced networks. In proof of stake networks, if someone takes over and just mines empty blocks, everyone can fork anew and remove the evildoer. Social consensus backed up by cryptography. Proof of work doesn't have such a nice feature, actually. In Bitcoin, for instance, if some evil created or acquired much more SHA-256 hash rate than honest actors, they could mine empty blocks forever. And if you forked to a new hash algo, they could likely dominate that too. Proof of stake is so very nice and good for the environment too. Furthermore, since miners and validators tend to like more coins instead of less, they tend to like to earn fees and have their coins be more valuable by being part of a well-functioning network instead of destroying their coins or mining hardware's value by attacking the very network that gives their coins or miners value. Economic incentives are pretty cool. TLDR, it's easier to protect a proof of stake network from attacks than proof of work network because you don't have to invent new hardware for new hashing algos that your attacker magically somehow can't get. You just see who is bad and don't invite them along in the fork, smiley face. Well, there you have it, folks.
So can you sum that up for people who don't understand these blockchain terms?
Oh, good idea. So like the whole point of crypto is to have digital money that you can't copy and paste capriciously. So like basically with Napster, you could like copy music files. And like the reason why we didn't have Bitcoin much earlier is because there wasn't a way to stop people from just copy and pasting values in a decentralized network. And we already had a centralized network like PayPal and the banks that would allow people to transmit value through a centralized entity. And the whole point here is basically to control the inflation. So people can't just counterfeit money. Yeah. So like that's the headline is like, the whole point of crypto is you have to make sure that nobody can counterfeit it. Otherwise it loses its scarcity that everybody planned on. Right. And like they can make more Bitcoin every year and that's fine, but it's based on the rules of the network that are being enforced. And, like Ethereum, the number of ETH in existence like goes down because that's part of the rules of the network. And so basically what he's talking about here is how those rules get enforced are based not only on where the rules are written, but also like all the participants in the network, they make a decision of like where to bridge their money in and out of. If I created a fork of Pulse Chain today, nobody would participate in it. They wouldn't bridge money from their bank account, and they wouldn't like put their Ethereum and their tokens that everybody agrees has value. They wouldn't put those in. So just like there's social consensus of like what doesn't have value, there's also social consensus for what does have value. And like when Ethereum forked from two different versions of Ethereum back in 2015 or 16 or 17, whenever that was, there was Ethereum Classic and then like Ethereum. And like Bitcoin went through this as well too. And like, so there's different examples we can see of like people splitting off and doing their own thing. What Richard is saying here is like, contrary to what Eric said, Pulse Chain is not a centralized chain in the ways that matter, like the consensus rules, because if the OA acted maliciously, or if whoever has 90% of the coins, if they like screwed everybody over, then everybody could get together and just cut them out of the system. And then you'd have your value back. Like if the OA ever did anything malicious. Did I make that more confusing or less confusing? Be honest.
I think less confusing. So with the proof of work, there's no good way to take care of scammers. Whereas the proof of stake, there can be social consensus on this is a scammer. Let's start again and not invite them to join us, and so that we'll be clean. So does that sound about right?
Yeah, like, well, I mean, people can argue a lot about like whether proof of stake or proof of work is like more valuable, and like what the pros and cons are, what the trade-offs are of these two different systems. Proof of stake is the game theory that says that like that validators can put up a stake of like coins that they can lose if they don't tell the truth about which transactions are valid and which transactions need to be thrown out because they're trying to double spend the same coins. This is all like all of Bitcoin and Ethereum and Pulse Chain came out of like solving the double spend problem, which is like a famous computer and cryptography problem that Bitcoin solved with the distributed ledger. But part of that idea was, basically this idea of like proof of work means you're burning electricity using more and more computing power, and that's how Bitcoin makes sure that it can keep its consensus rules the same. So whoever burns the most electricity and like keeps linking all of the blocks in the blockchain, that's the true version of Bitcoin that everybody else can point to and say, yeah, like that's the one that counts. And so that's one version of like how humans have solved this idea of like, how do you keep a decentralized network together instead of always forking off in a bunch of different ways. It's like proof of work means like how much computing work are you going to do by like running supercomputers that compete to like burn the most electricity and like basically prove their honesty that way. Whereas like another way, like which basically that is a kind of proof of stake when you really get down to it, because the stake that's being created is burning electricity on computers. Like that's the cost that the validators or in this case, the miners are using. And so I think like, yeah, at the end of the day, like Richard is pointing out correctly that this argument really goes down to what type of, even proof of work is a type of proof of stake, but it's a less efficient one because it burns more electricity than Finland and like, contributes to greenhouse gases. And it's harder to change and harder to like fork someone out of versus like having the mechanism in Pulse Chain. Even though the OA could create more validators, you could still have like all of the other validators break off and do their own thing. And nobody has to change they don't have to change like the type of computers that they're running. They would basically just like update the chain ID. It's like one setting versus like in Bitcoin, you would actually have to buy completely different computers if you wanted to break off. So I think that's the simplest way to explain what he's saying is like in Pulse Chain, you just have to change one setting if you want to fork out a bad actor. And in Bitcoin, you have to like buy a bunch of you have to buy billions of dollars of new computers.
Fair enough. And the more validators we have, the more decentralized we are, basically, right? So the harder it is, or more impossible it is for anybody to ever shut Pulse Chain down. And I think we already have a stupid number of validators, so that's pretty positive.
It's kind of hard to measure like how many independent validators there are,
right?
Because you can run like 100 validators on one computer, and that matters a lot. So if Pulse Chain only had 50 validators or 50 individuals who were running 100 validators each, that would not be the most centralized. So it's probably some number in between 50 and 50,000, which is the number of like instances of validators that are running.
Right.
But that's good. Like that's
the barrier to entry is way lower
sufficient.
than being a Bitcoin miner, though, right? Like if you want to get into validating, you don't need $50,000 worth of equipment. Like, you need like a decent, maybe $1,000 to $2,000 computer on the outside, I would think. You be able to run multiple validators.
Right. And yeah, I mean that matters to have a fresh person doing it and learning that. And the penalties aren't as high as like we thought that they would be per se. Is my understanding, being a non-miner, but I think
the cost is so much lower. Even Ethereum is 32 Ethereum to be a validator, is my understanding, and Pulse Chain is 32 million Pulse, but that's way, way, way less, right? How much is 32 million Pulse right now? Let me take a look.
Probably like 1,600. Well, probably like less than $2,000.
$1,968. Less than 2,000. A fraction of what it would cost you to do the exact same thing on Ethereum. Still some technical knowledge there. I honestly haven't done it yet, but I've read the documents, and it's hard enough that I know it would take me a while to figure out. I wouldn't be able to do it instantly. I'm sure some people can, but it's not impossible to figure out.
So, I mean, my takeaway from this is that like Richard is watching so closely the community that he saw Eric's like reply on a reply, like calling out, the integrity of like Pulse Chain, and already replied without even referencing that tweet. Or maybe he was just thinking it anyway, maybe he doesn't communicate with anybody, but there you go. I mean, that's that's a good thing if your founder is paying that close attention to things and backing you up with facts and good ideas.
I think Eric Wall is great for the Pulse chain. He sets up all these layups for Richard to dunk, and if Richard starts taking those shots again, I hope Eric keeps setting them up, because that's a fantastic interaction with the community.
I mean, yeah, I didn't really have that like talking point down per se. Like whenever I read that earlier today, I was like, I don't know how I would like debate against that, but like this definitely makes sense now that Richard pointed out all this.
But the fact that he is interacting with the community like that's fantastic, right? So, probably he read what Eric wrote, and probably he knew that Eric would read his response, and and he's there, right? Like on the same day that he left us a 1 hour Christmas informational message. So, I'd prefer to have him on the screen with us right now, but it sounds like we're getting close to that. I'm feeling bullish about the return of Richard Hart.
I found the tweet finally.
Nice.
Eric said, I thought it, or like he's replying to, I don't know, people just talking shit. Eric was talking shit. And then he says, I thought it was too expensive to end stakes or claim rewards. That's why Hex exists on Pulse Chain now as a substitute. And then he says, the most centralized POS, which should stand for proof of stake, chain in existence, where 95% of the potential stake is owned by Richard and can be stopped at any moment.
That's a good argument, because the OA account has a large quantity of the tokens, but that's generally accepted by the community, and that's how Hex was set up as well. And part of that ends up being whale protection in a way, because nobody else could come in and set up 200,000 validators to take over the chain and to commit fraud on the chain, because the OA account could turn it on, shut them down if it had to. All right. So there's some, I see that as where Eric's using it as a FUD item, but he's probably well aware, like he's a smart guy, that it is actually a security item that the OA account could turn on 200,000 validators in a day and shut down any sort of unsavory thing that was happening if required.
Well, there were lots of Bitcoiners thinking it, and I'm glad we've gotten it out into the open.
Sure. Come on, Bitcoiners. We'll fight all of you.
With our words.
Yes. Verbally. Argumentative jousting. But yeah, so much more interaction in the last 3 days than we've had in how long. Pretty excited about that. It seems like there's an obvious effect on the price, even though Richard never really said much about price in any of his musings. Looks like there's a very nice looking recovery on the chain. Pulse up 20% today, which is pretty awesome. Whereas Pulse is up 7.35% today, and it was up like a whole bunch yesterday after the recovery. So I think we're we might be on the path to sack rates and that sort of thing.
How cool would that be?
That'd be pretty cool. Pulse X is doing particularly well. Like the Pulse X to Pulse ratio is just about as high as it's ever been.
Wow.
0.69 Pulse to 1 Pulse X. And from the chart I'm looking at, which is the main chart, the high is like 0.73 and change, which was only only in November. So it's pushing past that point. We might see that 1-to-1 ratio, which is interesting considering that Pulse X burns itself. So we'll see if that continues to be a thing, or if Pulse picks up steam against that. But it's not a negative thing when things perform well against Pulse, like Crispy was saying. Don't, when you're looking at these, maybe don't worry so much as the USD value as the value versus pulse. So I think that is the benchmark on the pulse chain. How did this coin do versus pulse? Ink's looking pretty good too, up 14.81%. Not bad at all.
Go Ink.
Yeah. And there's still, like Crispy was saying, there's still a bit of a deal on Hex versus Pulse. It's not ridiculously huge, but Hex up 10%, not bad. We're looking at around 305 Pulse per Hex, whereas like a recent high from November was like 440-ish, something like that. So there's still
Hex is like a really hard one for me to predict relative to the other ones, because I feel like I've nailed down the web of liquidity between like USD, ETH versus like PulseX, and Ink. But for Hex, even though I can look at the liquidity, I think with all like the end staking that happens and like all the people who buy it that are just locking it up forever and stuff like that, it's really hard for me to make a definitive like statement when it comes to like the other core RH assets. I know that Pulse is going to move the least, and like then Ink is going to move the second least, and PulseX is going to rip the most, basically, is like how I've seen it. Although I know last year around this time, basically Ink was the one moving the most, but I think it's all a function of like how the liquidity is spread out and how Hart's law works. And so, yeah, I have a particularly good read on like the price movements of the three cores other than Hex. Do you guys have any like insights? Is there like something I'm missing, or is it just the wild card?
Well, he basically, for anybody who's doing, for anybody who's looking to accumulate value and understand what's happening with liquidity, he laid it out pretty well in his stream. I don't know if you picked up on that. I know it goes over a lot of people's heads, but the the value movers are the value that you can get over to Ethereum, right? So ETH and EDI, and then EUSDC and EUSDT. So that was my interpretation, right? So what does that all mean to me when I'm looking at it? It just means that I have to go through Pulse typically to get out, whether I see it or not. All right, if I'm trying to move value out. If I want to have a successful pool, go try setting up an LP, web with a token with no pulse. Go try that. No, not too good, right? So the only people that have been super successful with that are the ones that have set up multiple tokens, and one of their tokens at least is anchored somewhere, to pulse, to open up a window, right? Anyway, so this whole web is very interesting, and how it goes. I mean, sometimes when you do a dollar transaction, you generate $4 in volume, sometimes more than that, depending on what's going on. Anyways, but I think he laid all that out, and that's all in support of you, Maddie, and what you had said. I think in reality, Pulse is going to be harder to pump. Doesn't mean there won't be times where it goes higher in ratios. It just means I think that you're going to have, the further you get out from Pulse, you will have greater X potential in either direction, whether you want to call it, the volatility can be there, right? So the further I get out from Pulse, I put Pulse X and Ink in this category, right, where they can swing up and down. Really funny when you look at the correlations; they don't correlate with Pulse very well, right? It's very interesting how that movement's getting done. Hex tends to correlate with pulse, and ink and pulsex tend to correlate with each other. It doesn't mean there's not a relationship. There is, but just in kind of like general terms, right? And this is why I think you'll see this piston effect, right? They used to call that flippering, right? Where people are flippering between quote unquote. I may have made that up. I don't know. I thought that's what people called it, though, where they would be flipping from Bitcoin in the old days over to Ethereum and back and forth and back and forth. And they were simply increasing units. I mean, that was the goal, ratio trading, period. Some people still operate that way. Again, USD isn't necessarily the goal. It's to how do you end up with more of the units? And in any case, yeah, I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see. It's like a tag team match. I don't know. Fast Abdoul, you guys have Canadian wrestling? I don't even know. But yeah. So it's like a tag team. It's like a tag team. You got your pulse and your hex and they got the little midget hex with them, right? It jumps in sometimes. I guess that's the wrong word. I'm sorry. But anyways, a little person, and then you have on the other side you got the ink and the pulse hex, right? And they're just tag teaming back and forth as this thing goes on. And I just think you're gonna see more more jumps from the ropes when we're talking about hex and hex, and then probably ink, as compared to pulse hex and pulse. It's going to be a fantastic thing. This is why again, Richard already gave us like all this mapping and thinking about this, like which one's going to win. I don't know. So just have exposure all four. That's my approach. Like,
yep.
I'm and I think it's pretty dangerous to be like all focused on the only thing they do is ink, or the only thing that matters is pulse hex, or the only thing is hex. Because particularly if you're going to get emotional about it, really bad idea, because then all of a sudden you're swapping probably late, reducing your units, right? Every time one of these shifts happens.
Right.
Anyways,
well, that's a good analysis.
Sorry for the run-on conversation, but just thinking off the top of my head here.
Yeah. So what happens, Crispy, if like right now hex is roughly 300 pulse per hex? So what happens if pulse does a 10x in price? What happens to the price of hex?
What if hex goes up 10x?
There we go. So hex would still be worth 300 pulse each. It'd just be worth like.
Oh, if they go up in together, yeah. I think it's it's a little bit off. I can. In the background here, I'll pull up my correlation so I can go look and see what the current correlations are. But yeah, I mean, it's been surprising. And then there's the whole second, and I don't want to say second tier as if they're not valuable, but you have all these other ecosystems that are out here that are in support of all this and all this different stuff going on, like your Atropas and these little subsystems that are all tied in, and how they will affect things.
So what about when people talk about leverage on pulse? Like, what do they mean by that? Is there any reality to that if pulse goes up 10 times, this will go up 100 times? I hear talk like that all the time.
Yeah, I think there's reality to that. But it really has to do with the ratios, right? And what the current situation is. Really hard to track, like moment to moment. So what it looks like, what it kind of looks like is, is this in an LP fashion. We've got some sort of like balanced methodology, right? And then you and Maddie are on the teeter-totter because you like that stuff, and you guys are going back and forth, and it's all fun and games because you're going up. And then I run up with my 300 pounds. I jump on one side, boom, Maddie flies up in the air, right? That's what we're talking about with leverage, right? And what happens when Maddie's up in the air and I jump off, potentially, or he jumps off, we just go to the bottom, right? So, I mean, there's just these types of things. So there's one aspect of it, at least in my mind, I think of it this way with LP, that LP makes a difference, how thin, how fat it is. And then, there's the, what are people going to do, right? Like, this drop had nothing to do with ratios, right? There's no, it's a social consensus, is what Richard was talking about just a few minutes ago in that tweet, right? It wasn't like the system figured out that it needed to be a new ratio over the weekend. A couple of big guys started selling, a whole bunch of other people followed.
Oh
That
yeah,
was it.
yeah.
That
No,
was
it's
it.
just herd
And they,
mentality, straight up.
and so that affects everything too, right? And so I'm going to look right now. I'm going to go November 24th. We'll do November 24th to December 24th, let's say. And I'm just going to say Pulse. I'm doing this. I'll talk out loud as I'm doing it. I'm just going to do Pulse as the correlation. Well, if Maddie was around, I'd share it on the screen. But so for 100% move on Pulse right now over the last month, this is why I say it's very, very hard to like nail this down, like what it would be at any particular time. But over the last month, 100% move of Pulse would have resulted in a 97% move of Pulse X, but only a 94% move in Ink. And these are actual, so it's recording what actually happened. And then so Ink 94%, Pulse X 97%. Right now, and now the hex itself. Let's see, the P hex was a 92, so less correlated, right? So it means it lags. So that's like phase one, Pulse goes up, everything kind of follows, the LP gets stretched out a little bit, right? And kind of creating this rubber band. Remember we talked about the rubber band effect, right? Well, now it's waiting for the big players to make a move. And so if relatively big player anyways, right? And so somebody all of a sudden decides, look at this, look at how much cheap E-hex I can get, or P-hex, and they go womp, and they flip over, right? That's what we saw with P-die, right? They took the P-die when it was at the highest rate and swapped into P-hex. And then what happened? Whoop, flipped around, right? All of a sudden that's going up, kind of flipping up as they go in value. Of course, now everything in dollars are down a little bit lower, but that's what I think is meant when people talk about this rubber band effect, the leverage. Pulse,
this is a great topic, and I certainly want to weigh in on the idea of like, basically stuff with lower liquidity being able to pump more, and whether that's something that is sustainable or exitable or not. But we got like a really great question here along the same line of thinking from Sean Sutter in the comments, who says, so what about the history of L1s always outperforming literally anything on its chain, minus an anomaly or a few viral meme coins? So that I think certainly is the case with Ethereum.
Yeah.
Pulse X is different though, because it has such dominance on the chain, right? Like when you look at Ethereum and you look at the DEX count. Like if I pull up on my computer the number of DEXs on Pulse chain versus other chains, we have relatively few DEXs, and Pulse X is by far the dominant DEX, with Fux and 9-inch always being number 2 and 3 depending on the day. There's a big difference. So it very well could be that Pulse X is one of the unicorns that you're talking about. Like ranked by total DEXs, Pulse Chain is way down there, like number 30 or something. Whereas ranked by total value locked, we're like number 6 today, just under BNB. So like there's a huge difference. Like in BNB has 116 DEXs, and Pulse Chain has 14 listed DEXs, and the bottom 10 are fairly unremarkable for volume. So yeah, Pulse X is maybe different because it has those big LP pools.
Yeah, and it also has the buy and burn, right, which is a different kind of an effect than inflation of Pulse, right? Because unless something's changed, right, in my mind, Pulse is still going up in terms of quantity, right?
Yep.
So
I'm bullish on Pulse X for the fact that it doesn't have all the improvements it could have yet, and I don't think they'll be that hard to implement.
Yeah, dude. I definitely I'm bare knuckling it because as I've said on this channel, right from the very beginning, I've only farmed my pulsex, right? So that's what I've done. That has been my chosen path. And I say I'm bare knuckling it because I started at the 1-to-4 ratio that went all over the place, all over the place. Now it's almost back up to, not quite, but I mean it's almost up to a 1-to-1 ratio.
70% of 1-to-1. Yeah. 70,
so
it's
it's getting really close.
Big difference. Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's always going to be conditional, timing wise, right? How am I? So I'm not suggesting everybody get out, but if I'm fleeing to safety, right?
Yeah.
Where's my safety? It's not PulseX. It's not that I'm saying it's more risky than anything else. I'm saying that what do I need? More things take Pulse than take PulseX for payment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's more liquidity there. It can't move as much as quickly, so there's upsides and downsides to that. But
so you have that utility, of that. It doesn't mean I'm saying that, but I feel underexposed to PulseX.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So I have some comments and Sean also said, so PLS is destined to be the first L1 in history to have trash gains as opposed to its level plays. ? LOL, I don't really understand. I mean, the liquidity argument is logical, but history shows different. My perspective would be Pulse already has better gains than anything else because it's basically because there was the same SAC rate of 10,000 points per dollar for PulseX and for Pulse. And so throughout the whole history of Pulse Chain up until now, if you joined, if you were an airdrop recipient, basically, you did better being in Pulse. Pulse went up to 350% SAC rate, and PulseX went up, I don't know, what, 2.5x or 1.5x at most. And so even at launch, people in Pulse did better. Even today, compared to SAC rate, people are doing better in Pulse. But I think another thing to consider is that when we go back and look at the history of everything in crypto, there was no monetization of swapping. So back when Ethereum was created, when I bought my first ETH on Coinbase for $7, it was $12, and I paid an $8 fee. That $8 fee went to Coinbase. It didn't go to people buying and burning on a decentralized exchange. It didn't go to people who were holding crypto. It went to insiders and VC scum and stuff like that. So that's kind of important to notice that in the future, I might predict that PulseX will outperform Pulse, but only from the perspective of people who get in now, because I expect PulseX to have more volatility, because in order to buy PulseX, you have to buy Pulse, because there is no PulseX pair incentivized in the farms directly to USDC or directly to Ethereum. So if you're coming from outside the ecosystem, you have to buy Pulse in order to buy PulseX. But then, so PulseX is going to be the one that moves up more and moves down more. But remember, from the perspective of somebody buying the top in 2025 or 2026, Pulse Chain will still be the one that performs better because it's going to be the one that goes down the least. And pretty much that somebody's going to be buying the top, that actually the average participant is going to be buying the top because they are going to make the top in PulseX. And the PulseX top, if I'm right, and if it's more violent, from the perspective of somebody joining, when the most people join, somebody who bought Pulse will have done better than somebody who bought PulseX, even though it's completely flipped for us now. So hopefully that makes sense. Like this idea that that like if we look back on Ethereum, it's not like a fair comparison. And I think that they can both do really well. But then it's a completely different argument when we're talking about something like a token that doesn't have the utility of you need to buy it to do a transaction on the chain, which is Pulse chain, or you need to buy it in order to swap, which is like a really popular activity on the chain, like has this like hyper buy and burn. When we're talking about like other coins with lower liquidity, 99.9% of the time, like having lower liquidity does mean, yeah, like the paper value is going to go higher, but then like there's less ability for people to join. And I would guess that it's probably very rare, although this happened in Maddie token where there was low liquidity for the longest period of time, but now there's much higher liquidity. Like that is probably almost never the case in stuff. But that's the case there where like the higher price is more sustainable for more people to exit because that's what the market maker chose versus other cases where that's not the case. Like in a meme coin that like comes and goes, which we've seen thousands of.
Well, yeah, I'd like to say this to Sean. Yeah, I like good conversation like this, and I can take the comments and conversation back and forth, but
It's great.
It's a little what I would caution myself on. You guys do it how you want to do. You want to go fight on Twitter about whether one's the other or whatever. Have celebrity death match over Pulse X and Pulse whatever. I'm just telling you, I really don't know what's going to happen. And I really don't. And I'm just going to keep both, and I'm going to keep exposure to both. And I will be super happy if either one of them goes 10,000x. I don't mean to cop out on it. I mean, I can see arguments. I told you I feel a little underexposed to PulseX, but
of course today you do. Maybe 3 months ago you wouldn't have felt that way though, right?
Yeah. But it really, see what it'll come down to though, fast, right? Is it's really like systematically or systemically, yes, right? I can see that this all should be able to ratchet and go up, but then there's this one guy who's got 200 billion or trillion or something, and they dump it down to zero, down to like really low numbers. I'm like, well, I guess all my theories just went out the window. So the only thing I can keep coming back to, it's kind of like with all this stuff, I keep coming back to is, yeah, I mean, people got to decide what they want. So if everybody decides they think Pulse is the one to get, then you see the Pulse price go up. If everybody thinks PulseX is it, that'll go up. If everybody decides tomorrow that Hex is going to go up, I'll go chase after that. And if for some reason they're like, which by the way, this is a sleeper, but the EHEX has the potential to do 20,000x. Where do you think they're going to go? Right. So yeah. So anyway, so my answer back to Sean for myself is, 5,000x, 10,000x, 100x, I don't know. Whatever it is, I think having exposure to all of them, they're going to go up. The correlations are there. And so I'm not going to, I'm personally not going to worry too much about it, right? Just make sure I have exposure.
What about the irony of Pulse chain becoming, or like the PLS coin becoming more valuable, causing the fees to be higher?
That argument's been going on, right? There's a couple of transactions I've done recently that are like $1 transaction, $2 transaction. I remember the last time that happened.
Oh, dude. During the wedding you were at, it was like a $20, $40. It was $40 to do a swap on Pulse chain.
So, there you go. Right? Is that good? I don't know. Maybe it's good for me as a validator. Keep going.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't know how it all equals out. But I've heard some people theorize, and again, I don't know that this be the case, but that somehow the pulse price will be kept artificially low because that would be a bad thing. But I don't know that you could actually do that without changing the technology. So I don't know. Maybe there's some. You have to talk to the devs. Like
Well, anything that happens
can
on
they?
Ethereum could happen on Pulse Chain in theory, right? So if
Yeah.
Ethereum gets an upgrade, Pulse Chain gets an upgrade.
Well,
Hopefully
yeah,
that keeps
it's
prices
been
down.
interesting. It's been an interesting question because a lot of us on the hex side, because I'm a hex miner, right? We've been kind of sidestepping the issue, but yeah, I mean, you got to make your plans with staking, kind of like we didn't do with ETH, right? Like, okay, what if it's going to cost you in 2 years a lot to unstake? Well, the units are cheap enough, so maybe you ought to be targeting, the 100,000 to 200,000 hex per stake, just to make sure that particularly if you're a little guy, right? They get big guys with the 20 millions, they don't care.
Yeah,
But
doesn't matter.
so,
Yeah,
anyways,
there's logic to hedging your bets with like larger stakes. That's certainly a thing. But I don't know. I feel like Pulse Chain was made so that we wouldn't have the same problems on Ethereum. So I feel like, and this is just my feelings, that if that became a problem, that problem would be addressed. Perhaps even to the point where there was Richard Hart decided to fork Pulse Chain so that we could continue to have cheap fees on hex staking. But I don't think that's imminent at all. But I'd be surprised if it costs you $100 to end your hex stakes, 2 years from now or something like that. Maybe it's a 15
Really?
problem. I would
Really?
100
2
bucks.
years from now.
$100 would be a lot.
Really?
We'd all
For
be
a hex
freaking.
stake.
How much does it cost now to end a hex stake on Pulse Chain, Chris?
Well, if you did it when all this trading happened, then it would have been $1,000 if you wanted to do it 2 days ago. I mean, doing a swap is so much more gas efficient than like ending a hex stake. I mean, that's what I'm saying is like if Pulse Chain gets super popular, that's
when,
yeah,
right.
when.
There'd probably be tools created to help with that. Like even something as simple as somebody creating an app where you press end stake on the app and it waits for the moment in a 48-hour period where it's the lowest gas fees and then ends your stake there. There seems like we have enough smart people that would be able to mitigate that problem to some extent at the very least. So it is realistic that that's something to worry about.
Well, yeah, I think where we probably end up going if something like that was to happen is just like Richard had said. I mean, a lot of the answers we already have. I think maybe we'd start up a parallel chain, and start routing through the second chain. I don't mean to suggest that that's anything now, but right. I mean, unless the technology on chain changes, right?
We could fix HEX.
I'm not sure that would happen, but it could.
Right.
It could. But I mean, Matty, that could be something.
With the calculation of a synthetic T-share, like a standard T-share, if that was computed separately, so everybody didn't have to run the interest calculation every time they end a stake. Sometimes there's hundreds of people staking each day, and then they have to go back in 5,555 days and every stake has to calculate for every day what the payout would be for that day for their stake.
Why was it done that way in the first place? You remember why?
I don't know that we have a good answer. Do you?
Well, I think the way it was done at the time, maybe the technology's changed, maybe we have some better options, right? Is we wanted, I didn't do anything, but the dev, Richard, the devs wanted to build something that did not require any other entity other than the contract itself.
Well, I'm saying that it could have been put into the contract itself, although it is important to note that like the hex contract is pretty much as long as a contract can be. Like there weren't more lines of code that they could have used. And so that is probably like the best explanation I can give. It was like basically either you could cut out the
Well,
Bitcoin free claim, which you already promised people, or you could like have a better solution to like this T-share gas
we got it.
problem.
We'd have to get a Solidity dev on here to actually address this. But what
Yeah.
I would say is this: is the bottom line, right, for the excessive cost, is it's got to go calculate the payouts, and the way it gets the payouts is by going and getting the data, for the contract on a case by case basis. At the moment you push the button,
I
right?
could
So
Right.
argue
it's
that
going
Well,
to
on,
get that.
but it's based on days. There's no interest like prorated per day, like within
Right,
a day.
but I mean, you're talking about changes, of course, to it. I was just talking about how it works today, and so at the time, right, the solution wasn't evident or supported to store that data anywhere other than to go get it fresh every time somebody pushes the button, right?
I
And
like
that's how it laid out.
what's his face, the developer of like Deci, he basically
You mean
dip catcher.
you mean dip catcher,
yeah
not dip catcher? What's his face? Right, got it.
yeah Dipcatcher, he he pointed out that like the auditors did ask why it was being calculated that way, and like that wasn't addressed. So I mean, my best guess now that I'm thinking about it is that there was not enough space in the contract
Awesome.
to do the Bitcoin free claim, which took up I think it took up 2/3 of the space.
Hmm.
And so all I'm saying is like, yeah, we could fork Pulse Chain again. Fine. I'm cool with that. Whatever. Like, yeehaw. Or like we could have the OA and like Richard and everybody get behind like, you know, you know, decreasing the cost of gas with the hex contract, like hex contract V2 you could think of, or I mean Dipcatcher has also other ideas of like how to lower the cost. But yeah, all I'm saying is like if we keep being so popular as we were in the past week, we got a problem on our hands.
Maybe.
A pretty
But like
good
I think
problem.
with Pulse Chain in particular, different on Ethereum because Ethereum was like somebody else's chain, but with Pulse Chain, it could be argued that it's a feature, not a bug, right? Like if Pulse costs more, then Pulse becomes more expensive. If you need more Pulse to do things, the price will go up. So like if it costs, whatever, $2,000 to end a hex stake in 15 years, then people need to buy more Pulse in order to do so, which brings up the price of hex because it's very closely bonded with Pulse. So I think when you have everything tied together, you have these four core tokens that rely on each other. And with all these other ecosystems built around them, is it really a bad thing if it costs lots of Pulse to add a hex stake? If you have a
Yeah.
tiny stake, maybe, but not in every scenario.
You got to leave meat on the bone. That's part of the design, which necessitated the creation of Pulse Chain. I thought in Richard's 1 hour address today, I thought it was particularly interesting. Me being neutral on eHex, whereas like other people, they're like blinded by their overwhelming love for eHex, like above anything else. But like, my neutrality on eHex allowed me to like hear Richard lamenting over the $35,000 of fees that were paid in one day to end eHex stakes, and him pointing out like, oh, that could have gone as buy pressure into like Pulse Chain and pHex. Like, so that's something that I'm not sure is going to get reported on as much, but is good alpha. Is like, from where I'm sitting, Richard is still leaning more towards like, why are people giving so much value to eHex?
Yeah. Well, it's not going to be black and white, right? So it's not 1-0. So just not even, I don't think it's worth going down the road of of us getting in a big fight again over this.
Okay.
But simply stated, yeah. I mean, that's gas. I mean, I have stakes that ended over there. I wanted to go claim my tokens because somebody in the market values
Th-
those tokens greater than the value that it cost me to end the stakes. And so I want that value. And this is DeFi, so
yes.
people are going to go do that.
Yes.
And that results in these fees. And in the perfect world, we'd all be like, you know what? We're going to starve it out and we're just going to leave it alone and abandon it. And some people obviously got that message, right?
Yeah.
Early on. And that was their solution, right?
Well, what I'm saying is like instead of Richard fudding EHEX, like we could just do the upgrade to Hex on that chain too. It's like there's more options than just like, you know, him freaking out about the cost of ending a stake. And yeah, like maybe I'm predicting that the game theory suggests that that'll happen someday. Because I don't I don't see this resolving, and like the reason I'm pointing it out is because as long as EHEX has value, people will keep giving blank checks to the Ethereum miners. Like Richard, by my estimation, will keep not liking that to the extent that he's not liked it, to the extent that like the community really didn't like what he had to say about it. Like this is a question of like if efficiency and like all these like important things we've been talking about, like how much it costs to do a transaction on the chain, and like leaving meat on the bone for future people who want to be able to create and end stakes and all that kind of stuff. So
I have a
Well,
solution that I think would work for everyone. If like on Pulse Chain, if like even if the price of Pulse transactions go up really high, but if the price of Hex goes up really high too, let's say it's $3 per Hex, then I suspect the math would say that it's okay to pay $1,000 to end a stake for most people. So that that's likely to would be a solution that would be focused towards the Pulse Chain if that's where the founder dictates it. But yeah, pumping the price of
yeah.
Hex between $1 and $3 would largely solve any unstaking gas fee issues, in my opinion.
And what I'm saying is that like on EHEX, like that equation is like coming up against social pressure, because like the more valuable EHEX is, the more gets paid to the Ethereum miners.
Right, but if the
Right.
OA is more likely to pump the price of PHEX, then I think the focus would change dramatically, which I think is something that people forget. Not that they should expect that, but it's possible. And it seems fairly unlikely that the OA would ever pump the price of EHEX. PHEX seems to be the chosen child. So, if the price of PHEX was, yeah, $1 to $3 each, then there would be no unstaking problems on the Pulse chain.
I mean, if Ethereum fixed their gas fee problems, yeah, then like I could see like a big resurgence for EHEX.
Yeah, probably not this week.
They're gonna be cooking until they get cooked.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm bullish on Ethereum in general, though. I feel like that if you look at the price of Ethereum right now, it looks like it's coming up versus Bitcoin. I think we're gonna see
Nice.
a 12 to 15K Ethereum, in my opinion. Not financial advice, and that
All
would be
right.
that'd be pretty good, because that would mean the sacrifice wallet would be pretty fat, and that is bullish to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Oh, yeah. I think I'm already on record. I think 15 is pretty normal. I think 20 to 30 is probably in the
Really?
cards.
Oh, that would be
But
insane.
will that happen? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We're
We're
gonna
behind
watch. We're
schedule
gonna
on
watch.
that, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Well, not really. It all depends how you look at it, right? Um, this time is different,
No, never.
maybe. So we'll see. I
Um,
mean, I'm still, I kind of freaked myself out. I was like, And now I'm hearing other people talk about it, but I had this epiphany a while ago, right? That, yeah, I have about 6 months left. I said this on the channel a couple times. You know, we got about 6 months left before what I would expect there to be a high, some sort of a blow off top, April, May. So I hope you guys have your bags packed. You know what you're doing between now and the next 5 or 6 months. Does that mean it's the end of the season? Not necessarily, because I don't know what's going to happen, right? Maybe we do something like 21 and you have a second top. Maybe it's elongated. Maybe we don't see a top at all. A lot of our indications are all trailers. I mean, it's all trailing stuff. You got to watch it and see. I was watching Dollar Cost Crypto and Charlie last night. I was enthused because I follow this golden ratio, and they pulled up the golden ratio chart too. There's no indication we're anywhere near any type of blow off, and the targets for ETH and Bitcoin keep going up every day for where the blow off will be. And so we'll just have to call it on the day, Maddie. But, we'll get that on record at the time. But when it does come, so yeah. So yeah, X's are ahead, man, for sure. Well, that's my thought. Anyways, my belief. The X's are ahead.
I feel the same.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I mean, like if Michael Saylor keeps buying billions of dollars of Bitcoin every week, like that's gonna be good for everybody, huh?
Well, yeah. Somebody go look up what cornering the market does to prices. I mean, I never remember hearing anything about diamonds dropping 80%. So you guys go figure that out, because
the beers owns like 80-90% of diamonds, right? So it keeps the price high.
Things could be different this time. I don't know. Because what I mean by that is we did have, we know it's different. We've been around for a while, Maddie, right? You remember when it was just like this wild, crazy thought, someday institutions will come in. Well, are they here? Yeah, they're here.
Right.
All the same people that were telling us in 2016, 17, stay away from it. They're all in. And who now has huge bags? They do. And who doesn't have huge bags? All those retail guys who used to have huge bags. How'd they get their bags? They sold them all, right? And so one of the ways you push the market up is you don't let them take it back. Say, Maddie, it's kind of too bad you sold your Bitcoin. We're not going to give you a chance to buy it any cheaper. You got to buy it for double now. You want it back? You want it back? Pay twice as much, right? Well, that's what just happened, right? So if you were one of these really smart guys who thought things were going to come down really low, and you sold your position because you were waiting for the 20K to come again, well, instead of going to 20K, it went to 100. Yeah. And so, yeah, your point is, yeah, maybe this time is different. Don't know. Well, we're going to play it by ear, because we got to watch what happens with the prices and what the people do. I mean, maybe the institutions will cause some sort of a dump. I don't know.
When institutions buy something, governments buy it next.
Yeah.
This is an observation I've made, through the past few economic cycles. Like, that's because the governments are like, highly controlled by the banks. Like that's the whole grift. And so, it'll be particularly interesting now because, crypto is supposed to be transparent and all that. And you've got all these pro crypto people going into office, starting in just under a month. You've got the new people taking over. And I haven't really heard anybody talk about this yet, but I very much expect like them to probably pick like winners and losers. And I don't know that that's good, and I hope that they don't do that. But that's typically what middlemen and centralized like powers do. And if they like, if they focus their energy more on like, making it cool for everybody, then there will probably be scandals in the other direction where like, bad stuff ends up, where like scams and like terrorists end up like, thriving. So it'll be really interesting to see what kind of brinksmanship this like new group brings along. And I just hope that they don't unfairly like punish things that are not in vogue now or things that they don't own personally. Like, I can think of something like Pulse Chain that has lots of merit, but not a lot of favor. And so I think that has a lot of potential. But if the new cryptos are, only like Solana and Ethereum, or like, if the Trump group like only likes Ethereum because that's what their bags are, I mean, that's typically how crypto people behave. And so I hope that that they'll be wiser and realize that that really for America to be number one, we have to have the most users in the world. And probably the way that that'll be achieved and the way that most people will start to contact crypto will be through stablecoins. And then it's going to be a hard task for them to like navigate that without making it a huge CBDC surveillance nightmare or something. I think it's possible that they take things in the right direction, but I'm also skeptical of centralizing power. And so I hope that they walk the fine line there.
Yeah, well, it's going to be up to us, right, as a community, to make sure we're heard.
Shout out to Goodwin is Speak Truth. Shout out for the $5 super chat. Maddie, I've followed you since 2021. Appreciate the energy you have to continue posting your videos without missing one week, even the bear market. Thank you. Yeah, the streak is alive.
That is an achievement. Man,
213. I think this is the 213th week.
You do good.
Even on Christmas Eve, Maddie is here.
That's right.
Yeah, you guilted me into being there. Here I am.
Even with broken collarbones. I mean, now next week, I think, I don't know. Maybe we could do like an afternoon show. I don't know what your guys' schedule is, but like, it's
it needs to be New Year's Eve at the same time, Maddie. I don't think we can.
What if we did an earlier show, like in the afternoon?
No. You do whatever you feel is best for yourself, my friend.
Okay, that'd be cool.
Whatever.
I'll be here for the deck.
Right.
I'm gonna be trying to recover from the next step. So.
Yeah, what do they have left to throw at us?
Yeah. Such a great event. It was painful, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine like anything much worse, so we had this crazy Interpol FUD and like bang, it's gone 2 days. Doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah. But you know this though, right, dude? You've been around,
Yeah, I know, but it's still like the stress is still real in the moment.
It's
right?
China. It is. It's China FUD times 10. It's deep pegging times 10. It's Silicon Valley Bank times 10, right? I mean, it just keeps going on and on.
Right.
It never leave an opportunity to shake people out of their position on the table, right?
Yep.
Now, I don't operate that way, but I understand what they're doing, right? I mean, maybe it's not quite as nefarious. Maybe somebody just woke up and said, yeah, I need to sell everything right now. I don't know, but they sure as hell sold a lot. And everything went down in dollar price anyways. And a whole bunch of other people did a whole bunch of other trading. Otherwise, the gas wouldn't have gone high.
Yeah. Yeah, I concur.
I mean,
but that fear, it is really contagious. And that was the thing that really bugged me to that day. Like, I wasn't that worried myself. Like, I was pretty chill, but like the fear from other people was palpable. And, and they were coming up with all sorts of things that were just untrue, like attaching their own FUD to things that, like, oh, the bridge is going to be shut down and all that kind of stuff. Like, people really jump on board those events. And, I would have liked to have seen the Pulse Chain community not be so reactionary, but clearly somewhere.
Well, it reflects their age. And I don't mean physical age, I mean age in crypto. Right? Because dude, how many times have you woken up and there was like an announcement that crypto was over? It's dead. Like it's dead. You know, like it's happened over and over and over. They just did it again to Bitcoin. You know, they just did it the other day, right? That's what we ended up having the drop. It wasn't quite as bad because,
Oh, I got
you know,
something for this.
oh yeah, there you go. The
This is
obits
a
are high.
histogram, like bar graph of like how many times Bitcoin has been declared dead by the mainstream media. And you can see like, you know, it was like, you know, 15 or 20 times in 2013. Then it went up to 35 times in 2015. And then the all-time high was 2017. Bitcoin was declared dead 125 times. And Jameson Lopp is saying RIP to the Bitcoin obituaries because there aren't as many nowadays.
No, because you look stupid, right? If you try to say it today, right? Because it's always about getting eyeballs on these articles, you know. Like we're always so careful. It was so funny. I was like looking at some stuff today that came across my feed. I'm always so careful not to give, not to let anybody be perceive I'm giving financial advice because I don't want to do that. I don't want to be responsible. You do your
Right.
stuff, right? But I share my information, the things I have, but I read all these feeds. Yeah, it's like one token after another. This one's going to 1,000. Says Maddie such and such, not all in. And Slow Abdoul says, that Doge is going to $1,000, or going back to $1,000. I mean, all these stupid articles that just come out like, machine gun style, kind of FOMO generating. But then you also have the FUDs, right? So the FUD generating stuff comes out too. The big, what were the big ones that might have thrown me off early on? Bitcoin Cash was kind of like a weird FUDish kind of a thing with that whole ratio trading and the
Yeah.
possible takeover, or the social consensus of moving, because a lot of people weren't in a position that would have been beneficial. They didn't get full copies maybe because they might not have been holding in time or whatever for when the fork took place. Maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to remember how I felt about that at the time, but there was a lot of, the China FUD. It's illegal. It's not illegal. It's illegal. Put everybody in jail. No more transactions. Have so many failures over the years, even before this last cycle. Of
I mean, that,
of different things. Like what was the one? Cryptopia. Cryptopia was one. That I remember.
the other thing that changed in the past like week and a half, other than the red notice, was or the like corrupt Interpol red notice, I should say, was that Hexologist had reported that there was like a second round of influencer subpoenas going out to like Hex people, and he did a couple live streams about that, saying that it was more specific than the previous subpoena he had gotten, asking primarily, did he get paid by Richard Hart? Which
Everybody's
they had
gonna say
already
no.
asked before.
He didn't pay anybody to do anything, so.
And of course, like every time Hexologist gets accused by the SEC of like, being paid by Richard Hart, he can conveniently bring up the fact that he paid hundreds of dollars for one of Richard's meals. So it's actually quite the opposite. And so that's a really good example of like how this crypto community is different than just about every other crypto community out there. In January of this year, we had set the world record for the most YouTubers live on one screen. And this is an entire group of, in that case, 230 people who none of which were paid to be there. And we're all there volunteering and being broadcasters, not paid shills. And it's really rare that that anywhere else in the crypto space you get that level, that you get this level of engagement and participation and leadership. So shout out to us.
Indeed. We do have the best leadership, I must agree. And maybe biased.
And so, yeah, I mean, like theoretically at some point, you know, like we could get SEC FUD 2.0. That's what I was almost suspecting, you know, this kind of a dip would have represented. So it's kind of interesting that the timing of that was so close. That might have been on some of the sharks' minds, perhaps, that were reported JEETs in this case. Maybe they got a new, you know, I don't know how many people got a new subpoena or an old subpoena or got subpoenaed again. But there may have been some of that happening. I also I reported myself in the past couple of days on Twitter that I was Operation Choke Point 2.0'd again, where I went into a bank place here now that I moved to Texas, and they denied me from opening a bank account, and it said, "We can't tell you why," and gave me this really like suspicious letter that said nothing on it. And, you know, that is kind of chilling. Like that is something I've already, you know, like I've already experienced this basically when I was subpoenaed 2 years ago by the SEC as a witness in the corrupt SEC's case against Richard Hart. I was put on like a shadow ban blacklist in the banking system. And basically the bank that I was banking with at the time sent me a letter and said like, come get your shit and get out. So that was, like that was kind of like, you know, really telling of how corrupt the system is right now. And we just saw Mark Andreessen, which like, I think that's the Mark Andreessen that's behind Andreessen Horowitz, which is like one of the largest investment firms in the world.
What happened to him?
Like startup guys. But then I saw a different Andreessen person on Twitter, so I don't know which one is which. But anyway, the one that got interviewed by Joe Rogan, like, you know, exposed and went on like a 10-minute like discussion about Operation Choke Point 2.0 and how the abuses of like the government had created tons of trouble for like lots of crypto founders. And this was something that was so important, this like 10-minute clip, that Elon had shared it and told everybody, like, you need to share this with everybody, you know, and it got tens of millions or at least 20 million impressions. I know, maybe more. So yeah, like, but what he describes in that Joe Rogan clip is exactly what I experienced, just being a broadcaster in the space of crypto and just basically, having a guest, Richard Hart, on my channel is like, that's the reason I was denied banking services. And so, I appreciate like all the support that people have shown. And I think it's important for people to know that this has happened. I have been lucky enough to like be able to open a bank account. That's like such a crazy thing to say, but like, the shadow banking system, I guess didn't go to all the banks or something. So I was able to open a bank account recently. And, I also have, as like my online bank, I have like Old Glory, which is strongly recommended as like a pulse chain on and off ramp, and something that a lot of people like brought up and recommended and is known for being crypto friendly. Now, if I have to give you any bit of advice, like hopefully this is irrelevant because, and this is not banking advice, but this is advice I would give to my future self. How about that? In the past is, So I've heard of some people having a strategy of like, oh, I'm going to open as many bank accounts as I can in case like, crypto gets shut down in one of them. And for me right now, the way that I look at the banking system, like thankfully Trump got in. So like maybe everything will be good, but like you never know. And so for me, I would not want to open up 8 bank accounts because if I got put on a blacklist, then all of those banks might be notified. Whereas instead, just having a couple banks, one of which being one that I know is crypto friendly, like Old Glory Bank, which works with zeroxcoast.com, which is like the pulse chain on and off ramp. Like that seems pretty ideal because then if there is more corrupt lawfare that like affects me or affects anybody else, then like, then I'm not like burning through 8 banks worth of like, relationships being soured by the government.
It's not a bad plan to have more than one bank account all the time at different banks. It's not terrible at all. But like, yeah, if you have one like Old Glory, that's like you can move and that bank is still your bank. It's your online bank that you can always access. And then you have your local bank. That's a great concept. I think having banks in other countries, if you can figure out a way to do it, is probably not a terrible plan either. Legally, of course.
I thought it was interesting how Richard went over this idea of like, not trusting middlemen. And so like breaking up your transactions when you're like on and off, or basically when you're off ramping, like to be, smaller amounts. And I had done that myself with like the large donation that had come in for the Hex South Carolina, basically like lawsuit situation, the bogus class action lawsuit against Hex there, and against Richard Hart. And I had like kind of like done smaller batches of that money into the banking, into the banking system until I was able to give it to the lawyers that I needed to give it to. But he also brought up this idea that like the system can still use that against you in something that they call structuring, which is where they like, pretend basically that you're, that you're doing something wrong by breaking up your transactions into smaller amounts. So it's something that you can't really give blanket advice for, but what you can do is you can like get educated and make your own decisions and, just kind of like vote for the right leaders to hopefully stop all the corruption that is the biggest problem. Agreed. Thanks for the super chat, Fast Abdoul. Appreciate it. Merry Christmas.
You as well.
So that was a long rant, but whatever.
Well, that's the last time the bank will piss you off with all this press. They won't want to take the risk next time, to be sure.
I mean, it would be really cool if whoever was responsible at the SEC and at the bank, like it would be really cool if they lost their bank account, because then they would know what it feels like.
I think it'd be really cool if you became a billionaire and they were like, Maddie, please come to our bank. And you were like, remember that time when I tried to open a bank account for my $400 and you wouldn't open it because whatever? Yeah, no, I'm not investing my billions with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I'll just, I can't really exclude them from Pulse Chain, but yeah.
Not so much, but you could exclude them from touching your pulse. That would be okay. And all these banks,
safe to say, I'm not going to invite them on the show anytime soon. How about that?
There we go. Yeah, bar them. No interviews for bankers.
For corrupt ones, at least.
Indeed. All these banks are going to have crypto interests themselves before too long, in my opinion. Like it won't be long before they want you to come invest in their crypto project. So I think remember which banks shut you down, people, when they start toting their CBDCs and their crypto-based interest products, which I think they're going to do. Maybe it won't be the big banks that get the old money that was shut down in the past, and the old money may well be the people that are here now. So could be a thing.
I mean, it's just nuts. Like, yeah, just being told like to my face, like, yeah, you're not allowed to open an account, and we can't tell you why. Like, that's the crazy part. Is like, what if I didn't know? Like, what if I didn't know the reason? That'd be so messed up. But the reason they won't admit to it because it's illegal. It's extrajudicial. It's like, like the private banks are allowed to decide who their customers are, but like in this case, they're deciding because the SEC is putting pressure on them, based on like a quote unquote politically exposed person. But what? I'm politically exposed because I had somebody on my YouTube channel to talk at a conference like that. That's
sounds like they're attacking the press with such an action, right? You're effectively the press in this case,
right?
And they're blocking the press from receiving unrelated services because you did a news story on someone they didn't like.
There's literally freedom of the press is like part of the checks and balances of, this whole free world. So indeed. We'll see. We'll get it back. What is this? What is this thing that Richard tweeted about? Like this old monk or something. Do you guys know about this? Have you seen this?
I was looking at it. I think the monk's supposed to be the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
But I don't get the reference of that particular meme. So maybe somebody who's been in crypto longer than me would. Or maybe it's a stock market thing. Like he seems to indicate it has some historical significance. But
is the monk like taking off his glasses and putting them back on, and there's like a dip that disappears and then goes like up and to the right? Is that Is that what we're getting at here?
Yeah. Well, it's just showing the it's showing what happened. Yeah.
Then he put it next to the PulseX chart. I didn't see that before.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't see that either. That makes sense.
Looks very similar, doesn't it? Well, the anatomy of a dump like that is pretty similar, right? V-shaped recovery, sideways, market decides, up.
Some things in crypto never change.
Yeah. I mean, listen, guys. I mean, I know I definitely feel sometimes like I'm not the most popular guy for the things I say because I say all this stuff that I think is rooted in my truth, right? But if you thought that there weren't going to be any dips, you missed the class where we said there were dips were in the game. I mean, so this was nothing, man. 40%. Come on. Right? I mean, seriously, you got to be ready to be able to manage this stuff mentally because otherwise this is not for you. It's not for you. Hey, I talked to my broker. One of my brokers left the facility they were at. I say broker, but just my customer service representative, so she had left and took another job. But all this time, right, we can never talk about crypto ever. Like if I brought it up, she's, listen, I can't even talk to you about it. I'll lose my job, right?
Yikes.
And so, but now, of course, things change, right? So I'm talking to the new guy, and he's like, yeah, well, we can talk about crypto, but we can only talk about those things that are available on the market, and we cannot make recommendations to go buy. All we can do is tell you what we know about what's going on. But that's super progress, right? That they can even like acknowledge that it exists. And I actually, he was very well founded in what he was saying because it's very similar to my beliefs. Maybe that's just reinforcement. I don't know. But he's basically saying, well, I think for the average person, this was his message. His speaking off the top of his head is that, hey, listen, crypto's really gambling, right? I, I said, well, got a point there. And he described how retail buys and then retail gets stuck. And I was like, "Yep, that's exactly how I understand it." So,
That's
anyways,
funny.
Yeah.
because right now what's happening is, particularly with the Bitcoin being close to 100 and having gone over 100, people going nuts wanting to get in. Like, how do I get exposure? How do I get exposure? They have to be super careful, right? Because talking about people with you know their retirement funds, right? And for anybody who lived through 2008 and saw your retirement disappear, like literally just disappear, evaporate overnight, it was pretty drastic. I mean, people that switched, from steak to cat food, and because it was that drastic of a change,
I
in the
mean,
value.
I don't know. I don't know that what we value as crypto is as much gambling, as like, yeah, what retail might get into outside of Bitcoin, outside of Ethereum, in like, fart coin or whatever, like the latest thing is. Let's take the Haktua coin as a perfect example. Like, yeah, that's a situation where I would say
Tasty.
it's maybe more like gambling, um, versus when people gamble, you can't really like hold your money for like 4 years and then it suddenly moons. Like, so I think that's the difference to me, is like the coins with like staying power and like, that have long track records, like Bitcoin and Ethereum. you know those are ones that to me doesn't really seem like gambling. Although, yeah, like if you define a 60% dip as like, your retirement is gone, then yeah, it's not, maybe it is more like gambling.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. To be clear, I don't think I would call it gambling myself. Like, I don't even know definition wise how I would even get around saying it's gambling, but I do recognize that crypto is a higher risk and more volatile than non crypto from one point of view. From one point of view, right? Because listen, if my bank could go belly up, and if I don't, but if I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, and they say, well, sorry, dude, we're going to give you the 250,000 back, but everything else is gone, I'd be like pretty upset about that.
It's happened before,
So
right?
it's happened before, right? To
Yeah.
people. I mean, not usually with the too big to fail banks, but in the little regional banks that happens.
Hmm.
So we are entering kind of new territory. I guess that's kind of what I was getting at, is that things have changed.
Yeah.
Rather than 4 years ago, can't talk about it. Let's
Yeah.
pretend it doesn't exist. Right now, it's a different understanding. I don't know if we're exactly in the first they fight you type of mode, but that's those stages of grief, the stages of change.
Right.
I don't know where we are on the spectrum, and it's probably all over the place. But
We're in the
but
part where we can talk about it.
yeah,
There we go.
we're finally at that point where it's like, yeah, and yeah, he was citing XRP, because of course, and that ties into my other point. Right, every other day I'm getting another email that comes in, or article. XRP is going to $1,000. Good, I hope it does. But for everybody who's involved with that, it'd be good for crypto too, I think. But
Sure.
I mean, I'd rather it go over to Pulse Chain. But I mean, but XRP is going to $1,000. I mean, there are people that are going to believe that and go buy that and then not be prepared for the dip, right? Because outside of crypto, a 40% drop, an 80% drop is devastating.
Oh, you never see that on the stock market, but
Well,
it's the price we
you
pay
do,
to be in the
you do.
world's highest performing asset, right?
That's what we do. Yeah. It's funny how we have all these things lined up, that we know all these lessons. Not all the new people might not have received that.
Right.
And that's what I mean. We talk about volatility, and what do you think volatility is? What is it? It's not goes up. That's not volatility. Volatility goes up, goes down, right?
Right.
So all these things that, and listen, I'm as affected by it as everybody else. I wake up and I see red candles, I don't feel too good. Wake up and see green candles, I'm very happy. Yeah, it's emotional. You know, you got to train yourself.
Yeah. This dip was really hard for me, like from an emotional point of view. I still like did the right thing, but it was the most fear because like I just moved to a new state and you know, like then my life savings drops like 60% and I don't know that it's going to stop dropping, right? So like yeah, that was like particularly terrifying. But here we are, you know, somewhat in the clear of you know, still can go up or down crazily, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, I guess
feel like
yeah, I guess the message out of all that is this: is that for people coming in, you hear the old sage advice about not investing more than you're willing to lose, right? I guess that would be a good one to remember. Dips are in the game. Volatility is the price you pay. I mean, yada yada yada. You have to internalize that and realize that when you see these things, that's what this is. And you have to have already made your decision in your belief system in crypto that you're going to weather the storm, because if otherwise you'll always get shook out, right? And go look at the history. You would have been shook out every time. And the problem with a lot of this for me is that if I saw this all happening going down, I would be slow to take action. And so everybody else would run for the door. I make the bottom and get the least value for anything that I swapped. And then the reversal occurs, but I'm not sure because I'm not convicted, right? And the reversal occurs and people have already bought it back up. So not only did I get less for it when I got out, if I was going to try to reaccumulate my units, I got to pay more. And this is where again, we need all of this volatility, and this is how value gets transferred. But I'm safe with Hex, man. I stake my Hex. I'm not doing anything with my Hex. It's there. It's going to go up and down, and it's a longer term vision, multiple cycles, 15-year cycle. You know, not these little mini cycles. These are cycles for ants. I'm here for the big one, man.
It's those 2 to 4 year cycles. That's time.
Cycles for ants.
And if you want to play the game of like holding and you want to commit to that, then you've got timepays.me as like your tool to be able to time lock, you know, your Pulse X, your Ink, or whatever type of token you have. If like, you know, if you want to play in that game, but you don't want to have the emotional.
Well, you know, you
baggage.
know what you need to do. You need to relaunch that and add some features to it.
Yeah.
Because now things are a little settled out now that you could actually do this, and you get to your dev and you say, hey dev, listen, I want to create a situation where people can come in, set up LP directly through through Time Pays Me, and go into the farms in PulseX, and then you're locking your LP token, your PulseX LP tokens. Or something of that nature. I mean, that would, because you know, when you said that, Maddie, yeah, I get you, but I'm not putting my Ink over there probably, because if I did the Ink, then I can't earn on it. But
Right.
if I could earn on it and it was locked, I might
Right.
do that, because I'm already crazy enough to be talking about round tripping. I'm like doing the opposites, right? Like I'll round trip my farms. I don't intend to pull them out, right, at all,
Nice.
and just let them go. But that's my strategy. Remains to be seen whether that's a good strategy. I guess we'll figure it out. But you know, versus pull everything, try to sell at the top and buy at the bottom, right? This is my strategy. So for me, that would work really good. I'd be like, well, I guess I'm committed now. Push the button. Time pays me. I can't get those LP. I can, and possibly you could even make it that I could put the LP tokens in. I don't know. I don't know if that's actually a thing with PulseX.
So like currently you can put LP tokens in Time Pays Me. If you know how to run like the code from Pulse Scan, or if you like hit us up and tell us the contract address of like the LP token, but it doesn't allow you to earn the yield like of the V1 farms, only like the, you know, the V2 farms where there's a token, and not even like V3 Uniswap, which gives you an NFT, but in this case, like only V2 two-sided liquidity where there's an actual like token that that can be put into the time pays me contract. So yeah, that doesn't like directly address like what you're talking about, but I would say as a crypto psychologist, what somebody might do if they're worried about like the emotional struggle of, you know, wanting to earn ink in the yield farms, but also wanting to make sure that you don't sell, you could set up a gnosis, like you could set up a multi-sig, or you could use basically a hardware wallet and like have a loved one have like the pin for that or something. You could do Shamir secret sharing and like not have access at the location that is most convenient to you, but shard your seed phrase across places that you find to be particularly secure. So there are different ways that people can make it. And actually, for myself, what I do is I have my crypto spread out amongst so many wallets and so many hardware devices and seed phrases and stuff. Like literally, it would take me all day or more. It would take me multiple days to like do a transaction to like move all of my shit. And so that's been one way that I know I'm not going to react like we saw in this most recent situation where somebody could have like freaked out when they saw the price dropped 50%. They could have, you know, sold everything, and then all of a sudden the price, you know, doubles from where it was, or goes up, you know, 50 or 60%. Now they're buying back higher and like hating themselves and like, you know, going through all this stress, versus if you kind of spread your stuff out or create certain like behavioral barriers for yourself. That's another strategy that people can use. But your mileage may vary on like, you know, the trade-off between security and convenience and all that good kind of stuff.
I think Crispy 2Fox actually has a way to do what you want. There is like a receipt token for the deposited LP that's earning. So you could, in theory, deposit that receipt token in time pays me if that was whitelisted by the dev. And it would be earning while it was in there.
Yeah, that's the point there. So there are ways to do it right now.
Yeah, but I think you're right.
I was thinking the UFO PTGC universe and how that works, because in that case, even though they provide a front end for the creating the LP, it is PulseX LP. You know.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking along those lines. I see Mr. Gelato.
Yeah. Canadian Great.
Shout out to Chris Corrigal with the $50 super chat, appreciating you all being here on Christmas Eve. Thank you so much for the super chat.
Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate Chris a lot.
Speaking of generosity, I guess I have an announcement to make. I'm helping Aubrey de Grey out. And let me see. I've got a tweet here that he put out here. Because, you know, the whole idea is, you know, we want to live longer, healthier lives. And that kind of matches up between Hex being a long-term crypto play and, you know, wanting to create scientific breakthroughs for people to be able to live longer and actually reverse the process of cellular aging. And so Aubrey, he's like the father of reversing cellular aging. Like he's the person in science who like argued that it was possible, like, you know, got lots of other scientists to create this field of rejuvenation work with cells. And so he's really famous for this. And of course, Richard Hart raised $27 million by, you know, encouraging people to sacrifice for Pulse Chain using the Sens Foundation, which now is no longer part of like Aubrey's work. Like Aubrey founded the Sens Foundation, and then like they basically like, you know, some corrupt woke stuff happened and they like, you know, kicked him out. And so he created LEV Foundation, which is Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, which he's created like the corporate structure so that it's impossible for what happened at Sens to happen here, which is really encouraging. And he's got immense support within the Pulse Chain community. And but I realized that he doesn't have a good way to accept like people doing donations in Pulse Chain. And here we are almost at the end of the year, and some whales or like even, you know, anybody on chain, even minnows, might want to like give towards longevity before the end of the year and give to Aubrey de Grey. And so he's now set up with a Trezor and the ability to accept crypto donations, including Pulse Chain, anything on Pulse Chain. And if you want to donate like Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything that's like supported, you can do that on levf.org/donate. But now he has the ability to accept Pulse Chain tokens, and I mean, technically you can send Ethereum there too, if like, you know, if you believe that that's more secure and like removing middlemen and stuff, this doesn't go through like a, you know, the same donation middleman that takes like a 1% to 0.5% fee. But I don't think they do that on USDC. So yeah, people can like, you know, read more in this tweet. I'll share it. But Aubrey is shouting me out. He's shouting out Vitalik and Richard, who have donated tens of millions of dollars to his work. And yeah, so that just came out tonight. And so anybody out there that wants to donate to Aubrey de Grey's work, you can use this address that ends in, or it starts with 0x, of course, and then it has a 9A1A, and then in the middle is like 371DCA, and then at the end is DB4610. And that's something that unlike a Coinbase or unlike some of these other custodians that do on and off ramping, this is compatible with Pulse Chain. And yeah, so go ahead and make a donation now and do that before the end of the year. And
so any Pulse Chain asset can be sent there?
Anything. Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, like the, you know, Aubrey himself like donated 3/4 of his like inheritance, like his family's life savings. He donated like $16 million to his foundation. And so this does not enrich him in any way. And it's he's kind of making me like his crypto czar. To help make sure that they get the best deal and that they that there's all this transparency that we need and proper security and all that. So there you go. Breaking news. Shout out to everybody who's already donated to Aubrey de Grey. You guys rock. Yeah, I sent $100 today because I wanted to test out one of the systems, and last time I donated, I gave $4,000, and that's outside of like the pulse chain sacrifice or anything. So for me, I dig it, and I hope you guys do too.
Yeah, good for you, man.
Good stuff. Following in Richard's footsteps here to support medical research and all that good kind of stuff. Cool. So we're right at 2 hours and 20 minutes. Got 990 people allegedly watching, many of them not from Interpol, and 120 on YouTube within that. So yeah, with that being said, we've had another really successful, really fruitful show, thanks to you guys. And so do you guys want to tell people where to find you?
You can find me at hexfire.io or on Twitter, hexfire.io.
All right.
Woohoo. Just like the little sign says.
I can be found at 2phux.io. Links to the Telegram room there. And on Twitter under @FastAbdoul, as spelt on the screen, where I have recently surpassed 3,000 followers. So
nice.
Oh, no, I'm back down to 2,999. So
Right.
get on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and for myself, I'm mati.pls.fyi for all my links. Oh, somebody asked in the chat about like why Trezor is the best hardware device. In my opinion, Trezor is the best because they haven't had as many like security problems or like snafus with like addresses being leaked as like the other major provider. Their chips are like very secure. Their security process is really good. And so that's the only hardware device that I personally recommend and that I use, even though, well, I guess I have a ledger just like to be knowledgeable about it. But, so you can find a link in the description below that helps support the channel. But that is, like the reason is because like they haven't screwed up as much as the other company has that makes them. And I think like their email list got leaked once or something, but like not people's home addresses. And then they haven't had as much like weird stuff happening with like encouraging people to like shard their seed phrase in a way that like the government can like step in and mess with. So those are a couple reasons, but like typically, there's more Bitcoin being secured by ledgers in the world than there are Trezors. So like both of these companies are highly trusted. So I'm not super against either of them. But based on like the question at hand being like technically, so you can tell your friends like what makes one better than the other. Trezor's better because they haven't been like, they haven't been compromised as much.
Agreed. Ledger had some centralization issues in the past too. I can't remember the exact FUD around it, but it was basically they set up a way where maybe you could, call them if you lost your seed phrase type thing, which, sort of destroyed the entire purpose of it. I think Ledger is much better on how they approach crypto and decentralization in general.
Like the newest Trezors, when you order them, they have like 20 word seed phrases now instead of 24 or 12 because they want to make it easier to enable social recovery in the future. which is like part of the problem that Ledger got into. But we know from like Staker app, like thinking about how social recovery could occur and like, you know, some like thought leaders in the space, I think like it's not out of the question that social recovery could be secure one day and make crypto easier for more people to participate in. But for now, we're not there yet. And like the solutions that are being presented, like kind of, you know, like they kind of like hit home like extra hard if you think a company is like helping your freedom and like you have to trust them to like not have a backdoor built in, and then they like kind of screw up your trust by like leaking your home address or like you know like having a potential backdoor and then like not like explaining it very well online. But in like Ledger's defense, like they're the only ones that like go to conferences and like will meet with you face to face. So I think it's, I don't know, they're both good, but but if you want the best, then you're gonna go with Trezor.
Fair enough.
So yeah, there you go. So let me load up the thumbnail here. And yeah, very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody. We'll be back next week, probably in the afternoon, with our weekly installment. And until next time, stake wisely, my friends, and peace out.
Stay crispy. Goodbye, guys.